Whether you're venturing out into the mountains for an exhilarating hiking experience, an adventurous ski trip, or just to take in the spectacular views, it's important that you keep in mind some of the risks of being at high altitude so you can enjoy your holiday safely. High altitude sickness is the most common condition suffered by travellers who visit mountainous areas. High altitude sickness occurs when you've reached a height where there is less oxygen available to your body. This means that the volume of oxygen in your blood drops significantly. When this happens, hypoxia occurs. This is when your body doesn't have sufficient oxygen to maintain its normal functions and preserve homeostasis. Homeostasis is when your body regulates its internal environment to sustain healthy functions in response to outside influences. It is at heights over 2,400 metres above sea level that homeostasis is interrupted and altitude sickness can start to occur. This is when you must start to keep an eye out for some of the common symptoms so that you can treat them as soon as possible. There are two main forms of high altitude sickness you should be aware of during your trip. The most common, acute mountain sickness, and the more severe, high altitude cerebral edema. The most common symptoms of high altitude sickness are nausea, vomiting, lethargy, insomnia, loss of coordination, and dizziness. High-altitude headache is the most commonly experienced symptom. If after experiencing symptoms of acute mountain sickness you continue to reach higher altitudes, you're putting yourself at risk of developing high-altitude cerebral edema, which is where fluid is leaking into the brain, causing it to swell. Thomas Hurd from the UQ Bioscience Precinct will further explain the science behind high-altitude sickness.
The physiological process of high-altitude sickness begins when the brain detects low levels of oxygen in the blood. In response to this, it triggers quick, shallow breathing, known as the hypoxic ventilatory response, in order to bring oxygen levels back to normal. The increased ventilation of the moist lining of the inner lungs leads to evaporation, which can cause dehydration. Furthermore, low levels of carbon dioxide in the blood can lead to increased alkalinity, which the body combats by producing more urine, which can lead to further dehydration. Low levels of oxygen in the blood can also compromise the function of the blood-brain barrier, the brain's protective layer. This can lead to fluid leakage, brain swelling, increased intracranial pressure, and ultimately cerebral edema.
Deborah Coots, physiotherapist and avid hiker, will explain to you some of the preventative measures so you can avoid high altitude sickness.
As a physiotherapist, I'm fully aware of the physiological causes of high altitude sickness, and as a passionate hiker, unfortunately I've often seen the effects of acute mountain sickness and high altitude cerebral edema. I have found the simplest way to avoid the symptoms is to take the time to acclimatise to your environment. This means when you reach 2,400 metres, you should only ascend at 300 to 600 metres a day to allow your body to adjust to the decrease of oxygen in the air. Also, stay fully hydrated and avoid alcohol and caffeine, which tends to dehydrate the body. And when setting up your camp at night, stay at a lower altitude than you have spent during the day.
If you follow this advice and symptoms persist, the most reliable and simple way to reverse the effects of high altitude sickness is to gradually descend. If after descending symptoms still persist, seek medical advice. Keeping all of this in mind, you should be able to enjoy your travel adventures safely. Bon voyage!